I will always let you know if I'm not coming.
The Parks and Environmental Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Martin. Present. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Navarro.
Present.
Alderwoman Rice.
Present.
Alderman Todd. Chairman Cone.
Present.
5 present, you have quorum.
Thank you. We have a number of bills on our agenda for today. And I see Alderwoman Spencer here. She's not a member of the committee. So we'll go ahead and take up her bill first, which is Board Bill number 134.
Did you want to approve the minutes now or later?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going out of order. I can't do it anyway.
So you can.
Let's get the superficial stuff out of the way first. So, has everyone reviewed the minutes from our previous meeting? The clerk sent them out earlier this week. Were there any questions or concerns about the minutes from our previous meeting? Is there a motion to pass the minutes from our previous meeting?
I move that we pass the minutes from the previous meeting.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. Aye. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Todd. Chairman Cone.
Aye.
That's 5 aye votes.
Thank you. With that, we approve the minutes from our previous meeting of July 12th. So we'll resume our normal business. Board bills for review, number 134. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Parks Committee. Board Bill 134 is a bill that would enable the city to place signs and ban guns from our city parks. Would really prohibit people from carrying pistols, revolvers, any kind of firearm in the parks within our city's jurisdiction. As you know, we've had several incidents over many, many years involving firearms and parks. One had made a really big splash most recently with a semi-automatic rifle during a children's soccer game. In talking with our police captain of the 3rd District, I know that this is an ongoing issue, and families are often calling the police to respond to firearms in our parks, and the police have nothing they can do. As we all know, cities are creatures of the states in which they reside. We are, of course, a creature of the state of Missouri, which has very restrictive gun laws in prohibiting cities from taking action and creating their own gun laws. What we have done here is found a creative solution to enable the city to go ahead and push the limits about what we can do within our state law to make safe places within our city. And of course, I think that our parks should be at the top of the list of safe places, gun-free places, places where families can go and have fun without fear of guns and other unsafe activities in our parks. So with that, what I can do is kind of walk through what the legal argument is, Mr. Chairman, or I can entertain questions from the committee. And I want to apologize, I woke up this morning freezing cold and developed a bit of a cold myself. So,
If you would just walk through your position and for the board bill, and then we'll take questions from the committee if they have any.
sure. So under state law, cities are prohibited really from creating their own gun laws. However, persons are prohibited from carrying guns in child care facilities. Recognizing that our recreation department offers child care by way of summer programming, not only in our rec centers, but they often travel between parks as a part of that child care component of the summer programs that we offer that aren't just happening in the summer, but we offer lots of programming throughout the year for families to take advantage of. And owning that the gun statute does not explicitly define child care facility, we are defining our recreation center by way of those child care activities and those family activities that we offer families. I am really kind of struggling here this morning. We're defining the rec centers and our park system as a whole as a child care facility as a result of that. Owing to that, we are using that to ban guns from the parks as a child care facility. This will direct our Parks Department to place signs within the parks to alert the public that guns are not prohibited within the parks themselves, and enable the police to take an action when there is a gun spotted in a park. That action would be to intervene. The result would be a municipal fine. We are not looking to really come down hard on people. This is a $100 municipal fine. We're not looking for retribution. What we're looking for is compliance and just keeping guns outside of the park limits.
And you said not to prohibit guns. I think you meant to prohibit guns.
I did.
Just for clarity, I know you're swimming
in a little bit of extra cold weather this morning.
So we'll take questions from the committee. Alderwoman Tyus.
I don't care if you prohibit guns entirely. So I'm come from a military family, so I don't fit in because most of them love, my sister is a expert gun use person or whatever it is. She's an expert. I don't like guns. Even when I tried cases, I would pick up a gun by the corner. So, but I know we have to operate within the laws of Missouri, the home of the anybody can carry anything. So in the parks that don't have child care facilities, would then we not be able to put that up there if they don't have some kind of a child care facility or facility at all? So some parks don't even have a restroom.
You're right. So what we're looking at is the park system as a whole.
Okay.
So the recreation centers do serve as that, the home base for those child care, those summer camps, but they often are, Marquette, for example, uses many woods baseball facilities, and they travel from park to park. And considering that sort of fluidity there, we're considering the park system as a whole in this regard.
Okay. And then I saw that the other thing you had was summer camps, which a lot of the parks do have kind of summer camp kind of things.
That's right.
Right. So that would maybe for the places that don't have facilities, if you have a summer camp, that would add another layer in there to be able to do this. I'm supportive of the bill. I just don't, I already know what happened when we did minimum wage a few years ago. They came right along after we passed it and got it done, and the chair was the primary sponsor, undermined us and took the money actually out of people's pockets when they were already getting it.
And to pay it back.
Right, exactly. So, so I'm just looking at what will happen when we go into session up in Jefferson City in January. So when we say no one, would that still allow the police and the park rangers, they would still be able to carry guns, yes or no?
That's right, yes.
Okay, so I didn't want to hear that, okay. Have you had any pushback from anybody or heard anything from any of the gun advocates?
There has been.
I'm going to stop at that.
Yes. Anytime you discuss gun laws, there's always going to be some vocalization from both sides. I think by and large, the communication I've received from the public, the city living public, has been supportive of anything we can do to get guns out of safe areas for our families. But there is an argument to be made that legal carrying gun owners should be able to carry guns wherever they choose. And I think what we're trying to do here is just acknowledge that under no circumstances should guns be a part of parks in an ideal system. Again, hearing from the police department when they get calls to take action responding to guns in parks, they're unable to do anything. This creates a point of intervention and allows us to just intervene and kind of stop alarming activity. What I want to do is give those folks that are calling the police when they see a gun in a park reasonable action on the part of the city police department in response to that alarming observation.
Okay. I don't see that there's any kind of notice about what the cost of something like this would be. In my committee, people are asking for that, okay? So we even asked for you just to say you don't need anything. I guess the only cost would be the signage that would have to go up. And would that be individual alder people pay for that, or is that something that the city would pay for?
That would be something that we would have to fund through the Parks Department. So you're correct, there would be a cost associated with putting signs up in that regard. We do not have a fiscal note. It's something that we could easily prepare, recognizing that we need at least a couple of signs per park, and there are several, almost 100 parks, actually over 100 parks in the city of St. Louis.
So I would, even if you don't have it now, I would suggest you have it before it hits rules, because they will ask for it, okay?
I appreciate that, and we will organize that.
I have no further questions.
Okay. Alderwoman Martin.
We had talked about this before, so I don't think I have any questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderwoman, for bringing this forward to us. I just have one question, because I know that the state statute regarding childcare facilities requires them to be licensed. So would the city be seeking an exemption from that licensing requirement?
That's right, as we discussed. I mean, so the gun portion of our state statute does not define what a child care facility is. The only place in state law where the child care facility is defined is in the licensing portion of state law. There are some, excuse me, let me take a step back. Under most circumstances, child care facilities would require licensing within the state. There are exceptions. So yes, so the hope would be, or the direction would be, that the Parks Department would apply, or at least send notification to the state that we believe we are under exception for those licensing. That's something we still need to confirm. We have discussed it and are looking to confirm that, but I do not have that confirmation right now.
Okay, great, because I think the one thing we'd want to avoid is just creating some sort of bureaucratic mess, when really what we're trying to do is keep guns out of our parks, which I think
Correct.
most of us here agree that we want to do. We're not looking to create some sort of bureaucratic burden and require all of our 100-plus parks to go through that process. So, yes, in that case, yeah, I'm supportive of this, as long as we get that exception so that we can move forward.
And that's something I will be shoring up and confirming in the next couple of days.
Great, thank you. No more questions.
Alderwoman Rice.
Thank you. I hope that I'm going to try to keep this fairly straightforward, because I know it's cold outside, and I know you're dealing with So I guess my question, first of all, thank you for the bill. I think that getting creative in a state like Missouri is important when it comes to safety and firearms, especially. And so I support this type of move to start trying to work things out in our marketplace of ideas. So the question I had is, was there any thought to, I'm just trying to look through the gun law here, and places that can keep guns out, can prohibit guns from coming in. They also include counties or municipalities to limit the carrying of concealed firearms in buildings, so if we're construing building for the park, if we're into a child care facility for the park, is there another avenue that we could go that the municipality could say, the same as we do for City Hall, that we can prevent firearms inside City Hall? Could we also be using this in our parks, because they are municipally controlled?
That is an avenue we looked at. I think there is some potential there. Not all of our parks have buildings, as the Alderwoman from the first pointed out. I think there are, but there are some other creative interpretations that we can come to within the current state statute.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. So just wonder, as much as we can shore up this argument before it ends up in front of the courts, because I imagine it will, or at least the state legislature will likely come back to try to take away some of these exemptions. So I feel like the more we round out the argument today, that's something that is on the record that can be taken forward. So reading into, you've done a great job lining out where the statute allows for exemption for summer camps, for licensure, and then that we can prevent this under child care facilities. So that was really my only question, and otherwise I'm in support, so thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, one other aspect, our state law does provide that any person may prohibit holding concealed carry permits and endorsements, any persons with those endorsements from carrying on premises that have been posted. So there is some assurance there as well, and that is why we are requiring the posting in the parks. I want to be very clear, though, we are operating within a very, very constrictive set of state laws. Very, very constrictive. We know that. There are going to be risks associated with pushing the limits on what we can do with guns. Yeah. This is not without risk. This is and so I want to be very clear about that. I'm not advocating that we spend a lot of our city money hiring outside attorneys or anything like that. This may, as you pointed out, end up in some kind of litigation. I think there's value in that. I think there's value in having conversations with our state legislature and our state lawmakers and those who are upholding state law and challenging us on what we can do. We are in a situation where we are besieged by gun violence, and we need to start having that conversation with our state lawmakers who clearly do not understand what it is like to live in a city that is really overtaken by guns, and we need to have that conversation. So I do agree that there are risks associated. I acknowledge that, and I welcome that, because I think we are going to start having conversations that have some meat to them and hopefully get somewhere with our state legislature and our lawmakers clearly do not understand what it's like to live in our city.
Here, here.
So, yeah.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
I just,
Did you, Alderman Bosley?
oh, yeah, Madam Clerk, can you please make sure that the roll reflects that we have all members in attendance? And then Alderman Bosley, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. Good morning.
Right. So I just, want to be clear, I think that we have a real opportunity here to safeguard our children. And this is something that, obviously the alderman from the 20th Ward is very passionate about, but I think all of our colleagues would probably agree that this is something that is extremely important for our city and for our youth in particular. I believe that this board bill is defined very narrowly by state law, to be within the confines of state law, and is something that the city would be able to defend in the event that anything were to happen. But the state law, as it's written, also provides certain exemptions because there's recognition that there's harm from firearms and those particular types of environments. The exemption that allows retailers, businesses, employers to put signs on their buildings, prohibit firearms, is there because businesses want to be free of weapons. They don't want employees coming into their place of business with weapons. Retailers are in a similar situation, as we've recently seen Walmart's being victimized by gun violence recently this year. So I think that with the signage in our parks, and then also to the Alderwoman of the 20th Ward's point that we do have recreation facilities in some of our parks, but even those parks that do not have actual recreation facilities, many of them do have playgrounds which are used by other daycare providers and schools, and by the recreation programs of the city. And even those that don't have playgrounds still have either fields or green spaces that are utilized by young people throughout our city. So I think it's a good approach to do this from a citywide perspective in terms of our park system. I wholeheartedly support this bill. I thought I was a co-sponsor of it, but I don't see any co-sponsors on this bill. So, Madam Clerk, if you can make sure that I'm added as a co-sponsor, I would appreciate that. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to pass out Board Bill 134.
I move that we pass Board Bill 134 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Todd.
Aye.
Chairman Cone.
Aye.
7 aye votes.
Okay, with that, Board Bill 134 passes out with a due pass recommendation. We'll now take up Board Bill number 135, sponsored by Alderwoman Christine Ingrassia.
May I add my name to as a
Oh,
co-sponsor?
sure. Madam Clerk, will you make note of that and add Alderman Todd's name to Board Bill 134? Good morning, Alderwoman.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This bill is similar but not the same to the one that you just discussed with the Alderwoman from the 20th. This would also be a pushback on state preemption under State Statute 571.107, subsection 15. I have copies of those if, do you have copies? Just so you know what we're referencing here. Subsection 15, after the incident that the Alderwoman from the 20th mentioned in Fox Park and a number of other issues I know that colleagues of mine and I have had over a number of years where people undertaking nefarious activities or acting in a way that's not safe or appropriate for families or children in parks. I reached out to the police chief, our board attorney, the city councilor, Julian Bush, the police captain in the neighborhood of Fox Park, and the folks that we organize our soccer games with every year. And we came back with this as the smartest way to push back on preemption from the perspective of somebody who is working with the city to undertake soccer games, any sort of children's activities. So even though Section 15 does state that the exemption would be for a private property owner, there's language further into the state statute that talks about other entities or organizations. So we are utilizing that language as the way in which an organization, such as a nonprofit that runs the soccer leagues and a lot of kids' activities in parks here in the city, they would apply for a permit through the Parks Department, and through that permitting process, as a part of their requirements, that they could, as an organization, tell people that they were not allowed to bring firearms into city parks. So it would only apply while those activities were going on and under a permit through the city of St. Louis. And I'm happy to take questions.
Alderwoman Tyus.
So I was trying to follow you. Okay, so you're going to try to use Section 15, is that?
Subsection 15.
Okay, as a premise, which starts out saying any private property, so I was really still trying to read to understand. So
Sure.
could you go over that again, how we could use the parks as private property?
Sure,
Since-
yes, so
okay.
this is similarly to the other bill that we just discussed. It is a pushback on preemption. And so the thought is that even though parks are obviously owned by the city of St. Louis, when private organizations are asking to use them for a fee, they're applying for a permit, that in that instance, there would be an exception for youth activities in parks.
Okay, so I like what you're doing. I just want to say, property is the ownership of who owns it. And since it's the city of St. Louis, I think this one will be one that they will attack pretty easy. I'm a property owner. Just because I rent my property out, I'm still the owner. So I see them really easily being able to come after this one as this is not private property. Okay, and that's my concern. I want to read through the rest of it again.
Sure. No,
Okay.
and I share your concern, and I think both the Alderwoman from the 20th and I thought it would be smart to introduce these bills together because there are concerns with hers as well with respect to how you define child care facilities.
Right.
It has to be a building.
Right.
And so we're working together just to move a conversation forward with the, well, I don't want to say consent, but with the collaboration of the city attorney's office, knowing that there could be legal action filed.
But I think, and I had expressed this, I think that in her bill, because we do have a lot of parks with facilities, that you get closer to what you need. I just think when it starts out, any private property, that will be a red flag for them to say that's not private property. So I'm not opposed. I just want to read it and digest it
Yep,
more.
absolutely, and
So if
happy
you don't
to answer
mind, I would like to
questions.
go to the end while I read it and go over it. Thank you.
Alderwoman Martin, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Alderman Bosley.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Number one, I appreciate both of you all putting forth these bills in an effort to try to curb some of the illegal usage of the guns in this city. So certainly appreciate the effort. I was trying to follow kind of the explanation of how this will work. Can you kind of just re-explain that again, please?
Sure. So when the incident in Fox Park happened, because there have been so many troubling instances like this over and over again, and because we know that the state does not allow us to control basically anything with respect to guns here in the city of St. Louis, I reached out to our Board of Aldermen attorney, the city councilor, Julian Bush, an attorney in the Fox Park neighborhood who is also the neighborhood association president, the police chief and the police captain to work on what they thought would be the best way to push back on preemption. And so what we came up with was that organizations that permit activities through a city of St. Louis park would be able, as a part of the permitting process, to ask for or require that firearms not be allowed during those times. So whenever the permit is active for those activities, firearms would be banned. And there is already a code in the our city municipal code about firearms in parks, but the police department doesn't believe, from a legal standpoint, that they have the ability to question people. And we're hoping that this bill would allow for them, they feel like this would allow for them to stop people and talk to them. And it also allows private individuals to ask someone to leave. But moreover, as the Alderwoman from the 20th mentioned, when people see guns in parks, they're calling the police, and the police feel like their hands are tied. So we're trying to put something in place for them so that they feel like they have the ability legally to stop and talk to somebody who has a gun.
Okay. Definitely appreciate that. So in the state of Missouri, it is not prohibited through state statute for anyone to, who's in, of course, lawfully, to have a weapon on any public right-of-way or any public property, right? So what this is saying, and I guess I'll be mirroring what the Alderwoman of the First is saying as far as the city of St. Louis, just trying to put it into perspective of if, I was in the park with the firearm, just that with my children that are put. I understand the flip side to that. There'll be other people generally in the park causing problems, brandishing weapons. I get that. But just on a hypothetical, if I was not a part of that group and I was on city property, say at the park right around the corner from my house that I pay taxes on. So, of course, those taxes go to the city of St. Louis, who furnishes the services needed to keep that park together. So I, in some degree, and I guess not from a technical standpoint, I'm kind of the owner of that property also, but I'm a taxpayer, so I kind of I have a stake in that park also. So if the police were to pull up, there is a private event going on. The people who are at the park don't necessarily own the park. They themselves are permitted at that point. They're not even leasing it realistically. If anything was to happen, let's say, for instance, somebody was running and they slipped and say cracked the ankle in a hole, the city of St. Louis could still be liable for that because it's the city of St. Louis's property, correct?
I would believe so, but I'm not an attorney.
Understood. Well, I'm just asking. So I guess once again, when you put things into perspective, realistically, I think that anybody with just a little bit of knowledge and how to reason, I think they could pose a problem to any officer pulling up and asking them about their gun, saying as this looks as if it would clash with, the state statutes, which is allowing you to, like this room isn't packed right now. We don't have, every news station covering something like this, so the public can really put their input in. So I think a lot of people won't even know that these laws have changed because they don't keep up with, unfortunately, what it is that we do in the city of St. Louis. And we can say that's on them, but it kind of is on us also to ensure that when we're making moves like this that are kind of risky, that the public is very, very well notified.
Sure.
Because just in an instance where, you do have people who have, let's say, bad tempers. They might be having a bad day, come to the park, brought their kids up there to let out some steam. Yes, they're armed because the city is dangerous. The police pull up, question them because maybe they look suspicious, who knows, and then find out they have a weapon on them, and then it escalates, and then we do end up in court somehow, and they end up contingent upon, how far it goes, they could end up winning that case, or things could go worse depending on how they act during that situation. It could easily escalate. I just want to make sure that we're looking at this from a well-rounded perspective because there are a lot of people in the city who are on edge. You got a lot of individuals who think they know what their rights are and don't 100% know, but they will act on them. So I think when we're making moves like this, and it is kind of that thin line, we really, 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 really need to vet something like this. Reason being, once again, we don't want another Stockley riot to ensue based on.
I appreciate that, and I think that all the comments you made were very thoughtful, and that's why this is very narrowly tailored. So the education portion would be on the part of the organization that applied for permits, and it would only be where the permitted activity was occurring. So it wouldn't apply to the whole park, and it wouldn't apply to the entire park or any part of the park while there were no permitted activities going on that were not permitted. And I think the other piece of it for both the alderwomen from the 20th bill and mine is that none of these terms, a lot of them, none of this has been challenged in court at all. And so all we have is the language that's in the state statutes and the willingness on the part of the city councilor's office if we get, if there's legal action filed, to at least take it to trial court to defend it.
Understood. So it's not for the entire park, it's only for the permitted part.
Correct.
So if I'm on the east side of the park and I've asked for, that side, anybody on the west side is still legally and lawfully able to carry their weapon just based on this ordinance, right?
Correct.
Okay. So suppose I was just walking and ended up in their area. Is there any provisions that would, give me some type of time frame? Maybe I'm not involved in their event, but I'm just
Yeah, no, that's a
walking the
great
path
question.
to get to the other side of the
So
park
section,
and step on somebody's shoes.
Right, so subsection 15 does discuss that, hold on, let me find it. Oh, you know what, this got cut off, I apologize. There's a section 2 that applies to the entire statute, and that discusses that there's individuals who could just say, hey, this is a permitted event, firearms are not allowed here. If law enforcement gets called, then all law enforcement can do is tell them that they're violating a law and write a ticket to that individual. That is the limitation of what law enforcement is allowed to do.
Okay, so in the event they walked up to them, wanted to give them a ticket, they could not lock them up.
That's correct.
For that, but they will run their names. Is there anything that
I don't
prohibits
know.
them from doing that and just giving them?
I would be happy to reach out to the police department to get that answer for you. I apologize, I don't know what their policies and procedures are in that regard, but I'm assuming to write a ticket, you ask somebody for some type of identification.
Understood. So, and the reason I asked is it could easily be looked at as and I don't have a problem with individuals who have warrants having to, if you don't take care of them, having to go down to the Justice Center. That's just a part of the way the city functions. So I get that, but I also don't want individuals to feel, how would I say, targeted based on the fact that you're not supposed to have a gun, and I can write you a ticket for it. Once again, when it kind of clashes and infringes on your
Yeah, I appreciate that. I
rights
guess
to a
I've just
degree.
witnessed so many times issues where I just can't imagine when it would ever be appropriate to be around a bunch of 5-year-olds playing soccer and flourishing a semi-automatic weapon.
Agreed. Okay, I 100% agree with that. I said I don't disagree with the bill itself, or I disagree with the intent. I just wanted to make sure that we ask the hard questions, say the flip side of it, because it could be a very different outcome based on people's ignorance on whether or not this actually passes, and people are unfortunately don't really get informed as they should within the city, and this could easily end up our police are not the, how would I say, nobody's trying to get shot. I'll say that. Nobody. So when you approach anybody who has a weapon, you're going to always do that with a tremendous amount of carefulness. You don't know exactly who that person is, what they intend to do, how they're going to react to you reacting to them having a pistol in the park or whatever type of weapon that they may have. So I see where we're going with this. It's and I love, because this is at least giving us a place where we have a safe place for our kids to go, where everybody has a understanding this might be a safe haven in the city. Run to a park. I'm not sure, but the idea is there. So I 100% get that. I am going to support the bill coming out of committee, because I think it's important for all of our other colleagues to have a say so in it. I am going to do a little bit more research on it to, just ensure. Just when we get to the floor, it might not be the same way, but I'm in support of the bill itself. I'm in support of your intent, and I really appreciate you taking the time to, push forward on it.
Absolutely, and please, feel free to bother me with additional questions between now and perfection.
Almost certainly will. Thank you.
Vice Chair Navarro,
No questions.
Alderwoman Rice.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to, since we've had a lot of discussion, I just want to clarify, this is a may statute. Like this, your ordinance would say that someone who gets a permit may post that a concealed weapon is not allowed.
Correct.
Okay, so because this particular, your ordinance addresses the part that says that someone has to post a sign, and so the permit holder would become the private property owner in this, so any private property whose owner has posted the premises as being off limits, right? So this is only, not every permit holder is going to do that. I imagine there's probably going to be some sort of cost associated with putting up a specific sign. And so I guess to Alderwoman Tyus' question to Alderwoman Spencer as well, is that a cost that you think would be borne by the Parks Department in issuing the permit, or would the person themselves have to create the sign and post a sign?
I would assume, after conversations that I've had on working with this legislation, that there would be I mean, there are regulations laid out in the state statute about what the signs have to look like, and so that information would be passed on to the organization who was permitted.
Okay. So then the organization or permit holder themselves would create the sign. So there's not necessarily a financial cost to the city in
Right.
this to produce sign. Okay. So just that, so the previous bill that we heard was much more broad in declaring the entirety of the parks to be childcare facilities. This is much more limited to an individual permit holder.
Correct.
Okay, sorry, just wanting to line that out very clearly as we go forward. So I think this is another really creative way to get at the issue, and I think, I do have a few questions about if we're calling, if we're calling these private property owners, then what other liabilities might that permit holder have account for? But I think that in our parks, there is some liability taken on by someone who holds a permit for an event anyway. I don't think that all instances of injury, or if something were to happen, I don't think that all of that is necessarily back to the city.
That's a great question, and I will get more information on that, but
Okay.
you are correct that permits typically require
Some sort
I mean,
of
if it's-
release of liability, right?
or
that.
a rider on like a neighborhood association's insurance policy or a nonprofit's insurance policy, so that there's an extra layer of coverage.
Okay. Well, I mean, in that case, I'm completely on board. Also, I commend you both for really creative ways to address this, and just taking note that. Yeah, it is kind of unfortunate that Section 2 got cut off, but the fines are low, and this is not, I know this is not intended to create more folks coming into our criminal justice system or anything like that, but these signs being posted, hopefully, I mean, the idea is comply with the signs. We have one more tool to prevent these things from being around our families, our parks, and that kind of situation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alderman Todd.
First of all, thank you very much for making our parks safer, bringing on the conversation of how to solve problems without guns, because I think what we are emphasizing now, especially the people who are emphasizing guns, are saying that problems can be solved with guns, which they can't. They are part of the problem. So families can be safer, and with your bill, thank you for that, as well as children and families can have a safe haven. I would like to become a co-sponsor of that, because we definitely need to do everything we can to emphasize the fact that guns are not going to solve our problems, that we must learn to solve our problem by working together. And thank you very much for your creative way and creative bill.
Thank you, Alderman.
Do we have anyone from the city councilor's office here?
No.
To speak to this? So
I would be happy to get a written statement or something of that nature.
The alderwoman from the first and I have been having some conversations here about, so Section 15 specifically, as you're aware, pertains to owners of private property. And I understand that your, intended ordinance is directed to those who are subject to Section 15. But parks not being private property, I have some questions and concerns about that. And maybe, it's something to the extent of just changing a word or two in here. So instead of in accordance with 571, 10715, maybe it's those who are subject to 571, 10715, because it's not technically in accordance with that statute. It would be those who are subject to that statute. And then also, there were some sections that were missing out of your addendum here. Section 6 is one of them. And Section 6 addresses, it jumps from Section 4 to Section 7 for whatever reason.
Oh my gosh, I'm really sorry.
It's okay. I looked it up online.
Awesome.
But Section 6 addresses how the General Assembly, Supreme Court, county, or any municipality may rule through administrative regulation or ordinance the limit or carrying of concealed, et cetera. So maybe there's a way to incorporate Section 6 into this as well, and referencing section.
Okay,
those
yeah,
who are
I'm
subject
happy
section
to hold the
15.
bill and take feedback.
If you're okay with that.
I am.
And maybe we can set up a meeting for the city councilor on Friday after our full board meeting and just walk through that.
Questions there.
And then I know the alderwoman from the First Wards has a few other questions.
Okay.
And maybe preparation for that meeting with the city councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I went down to 13, which addresses an area of an amusement park. To me, now that gets really close up to what we're looking for. If they can acknowledge that amusement park should not have a gun in there, I don't see why we couldn't also push at the same time
And we
back.
talked about that, and we're concerned because the zoos, St. Louis City Zoo's case has not been ruled on in court yet. Because that's what they're utilizing for their position that firearms are not allowed in the zoo.
I understand, and what I'm saying is, so many of our parks are now gated or have park fences around them, but I'm going a little further to say, if they can acknowledge that there should, and they being the people who are pro-guns, okay? If they can acknowledge that there should not be a gun in an amusement park, could they not just take the little step forward to say, it's just a little bitty one, okay? Because otherwise, do we need to put fences around all our parks and call them amusement parks? Could we not have a conversation with them about, could they acknowledge that guns shouldn't be in parks, okay? And if not, I would love to see if we could incorporate this. I understand what you're saying, but I still think that with so many of our parks, any place you can, sometimes you don't get everything when you're trying for a law.
Sure.
But, you know, depending on what they say an amusement park and how they define it, all our parks are amusement parks.
Right, right.
So,
I appreciate the question and suggestion, and I'd be happy to speak
Okay.
with you after the hearing today to talk about ways to improve the bill.
I just don't see why, if they got all the way up to amusement parks, they couldn't have just said parks,
Sure.
okay? We acknowledge guns have no place in parks, the end, okay? But I know the mindset. I have no further questions.
Okay, with that, I believe we're going to hold Board Bill number 135 until we have further discussions with the City Councilor's office. We will try and take that up again next week after we have those conversations. Thank you, Alderwoman, appreciate it. And we will move forward with Board Bill number 146. Primary sponsor is Vice Chair Heather Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, colleagues. So Board Bill 146 is a bill about making our city healthier and more resilient in the face of climate change. So our city's reliance on fossil fuels, as many of you already know, has resulted in dirtier air, and it contributes to the climate change that we are already experiencing. And luckily, our city is has already made multiple commitments to reducing these pollutants and transitioning to cleaner energy. We're on track to reach our 20% goal of renewable energy by 2020, and we are looking forward to reaching 80% renewables by 2050. And we know that our built environment, so that our residential buildings, commercial buildings, industrial buildings, account for 77% of these greenhouse gas emissions. So we've been taking a hard look at our buildings. And so last year we adopted the 2018 International Building Code, and that included updated standards for energy efficiency. And there are two appendices to that code that this bill addresses today that we would like to adopt as part of the code. And you have copies of those appendices in your packet there. So the building code itself is, you know, thousands of pages, but these appendices, it's CA and RA. They're just a simple one-page addition. And what these do is establish that any new buildings, new residential, new commercial buildings pursuant to the code would be solar ready. And what solar ready means is just that they are built so that they can accept solar panels and they could accept a solar energy system in the future. It does not require anybody put solar panels on new construction. So it applies to commercial buildings that are 5 stories in height or less. And what it says is they must designate an area on the roof that could be used for solar panels if desired at some point in the future. And that area must meet certain load requirements If you want to know, it's in there. It's a collateral dead load of 5 pounds per square foot. They also must show that in the construction documents that there's electrical running from the roof down to the electrical panel, and that there's dedicated space in the panel that could accommodate a future solar system in the future. And what we know is that it's much cheaper to do this at the time you're constructing a building than to go back later, tear out walls and install these things, try to make the roof ready. And most of these are things that new construction, like we're already doing. Most roofs now are already ready to accept solar panels. Just the issue is making sure that we've provided the conduit so that if somebody wants to hook one up in the future, that it's there. There are exceptions to this. So if there's already a permanent renewable energy system on site, you would not be held to this standard. If the solar zone is shaded more than 70% of the day, then it wouldn't be required. Or if you've got a licensed design professional that certifies, that it's not available, that it wouldn't be suitable, or that there's not room. Let's say you're putting in skylights, or you've got a roof garden or something like that, and so you don't have the minimum space required. If you can show that in your design documents, there are exceptions to that. On the residential side, it would apply to single family, two family, and then kind of what the code calls townhomes that are 3 stories or less, and you have to have 600 or more square feet of available roof space. And again, there are exceptions in here too. So again, if you've got a permanent renewable on-site system, or if 70% is shaded annually, again, you could you'd be qualified for exception. So pretty much, yeah, the requirements are there, same thing. It's just about making sure that the roof is structurally sound. And I can say, I lived in a house that was over 100 years old. We wanted to put solar panels on it, and they came in and they said, you're gonna have to do some things to reinforce this. It's much more expensive to go in after the fact. So again, making sure the roof's sound, you've got electrical running down to your box, and your box has some open space. We've already got building inspectors that are gonna go into these places when they're being constructed, and that's all they're gonna do is just check to make sure, check these boxes, you've got these things, it's ready to go. Again, the benefits are it's much costly to put this in after the fact. The average 2,000 square foot home is looking at 30 to 50 cents per square foot, as opposed to the cost of doing this after the fact, which could be around $4,000. So, when we think about ways that we want to market the city of St. Louis in this age of climate change, we've got to be able to show that we have a serious commitment to reducing our greenhouse gases and that our buildings are ready. And I think, right now, the people who can most benefit from solar systems are the people who can afford the upfront costs. And what this does is say, moving into the future, we've taken care of some of these costs. We're maximizing the availability of renewable energy to people into the future. So I think this really serves the future of St. Louis to know that we are doing everything we can to make these renewable sources of energy available, and taking care of some of this cost, maximizing the benefit of doing this as cheaply as possible up front. So again, this bill simply requires that when new construction comes in, that when they're budgeting for things like plumbing and electrical, materials, appliances, that they've also got a little bit in there, the budget for energy infrastructure. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Alderwoman Tyus.
So I'm under the gun. My husband works green energy. I have no choice but to vote for this. But I do have a question. Do we know what the cost of requiring the contractors to do something like this is at all?
So the estimate that we have is about 30 to 50 cents per square foot. Is for like an average home that's about 2,000 square feet. So that's what we would be looking at.
I usually can vote no for things, but I'm a supporter.
Alderwoman Martin.
Can you talk a little bit about other cities that have adopted this and kind of where we are in St. Louis as far as ahead or behind?
Sure, let me pull up. I know there some of the other cities that are doing this are obviously cities that have a lot of sunshine have already taken advantage of this. And let's see, I do have actually, can I just grab my chart off my laptop?
Oh, sure.
Also, I'll just mention here this morning, we have Maurice Mouillet, who is our climate resiliency officer, and then Frank Oswald, our building commissioner. So if either of you feel like you've got those cities off the top of your head, otherwise I can pull up the chart. Did you want to address the question about where other cities are? Well, does Maurice want to do? I mean, if you, all right, okay, I got to pull up the chart. If you already have the chart in front of you. And one thing I will say is, we've been working on some of these issues. St. Louis is really kind of at the forefront in some ways. Yes. Yes. So Gladstone, Missouri is a Midwestern city here in our own state that has already adopted this for commercial. And then there are other larger cities. I know more in the South, Tucson, Austin, some of those large cities, again, with lots of sunshine that have already done this. But we do have an example here in our own state that is moving forward on the commercial side.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it?
Oh, yes, that's all for me.
I do have
Alderman Bosley?
a chart I'm happy to share with you if you'd like to see
That's
others.
interesting with Gladstone.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, when I was reading through this, I just want to make sure I'm looking at this the correct way. This requires anyone building a home to not only be solar ready, but it looks like you have to actually have solar panels. Am I reading this wrong?
No, that's not.
That's the total?
Where are
not
you
less than
looking? So
40%
it's,
of the-
it
I'm
does
sorry, go
not
ahead.
require solar panels. So what it does, if you look, it requires that you have designated space on your roof where solar panels could be placed at a later date, that you have, and so it talks about roof load,
Mm-hmm.
and then it talks about this interconnection pathway, which again is making sure that you've got conduit running, from the roof down, and you've got reserved space in the electrical panel. So you don't have to have, it's just, those are kind of the basic things. If somebody wants to go in later and put in solar panels, those are the things that are costly, is making sure that there's, sometimes you have to clear off space on the roof, and then you're gonna have to go into the walls and connect those panels down, usually the panels down in the basement, or you're gonna have to upgrade your electrical box in order to be able to accommodate. So right now, we're just saying, make sure that the electrical box has that space in there, and then somebody doesn't have to pay for a new box at a later date, and they don't have to go open up walls, do the things they need to do to lay new wiring. But it does not require that panels are put on. It's just making that, what it really does is opens up this opportunity for somebody in the future. So it makes it cheaper for somebody in the future to be able to put a solar system on the roof.
Understood. And that's at the, so you said it's about 50 cents per square foot.
What the estimate that I have is about 30 to 50 cents per square foot. So if you're looking at, a 2,000 square foot home, I think, we're talking like $600 to $1,000.
That seems doable. That's at first I was thinking more like the installation could easily be somewhere, starting off at 20,000 or more, contingent upon how many kilowatts you're trying to get. But we're not even going that deep. You just are making sure that it is prepared in the event somebody bought the house and wanted to put.
Right.
Just getting the city prepared for the future.
Yeah, because the benefit is you've already got the contractors there. You've already got the electrician there.
It's already broken down.
Right. It's, you're not paying to bring somebody back in to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? It's like boom, 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 these things are there.
Understood. And it's cost effective. I guess,
Absolutely.
especially for the future. And it's $600 to $1,000. It's not much. Now, I do have questions on the commercial side of things. Does the cost go up because it is a commercial build? I know generally cost for commercial versus residential is it's different, of course, contingent upon what type of commercial facility that you're building and home also. But do you know the difference in any cost that may be associated with a commercial build or commercial readiness versus residential?
Yeah, I think it really is going to depend on the size of the facility. I think the one thing with commercial buildings is they're already often putting a lot of things on the roof, so they need it to be a stronger roof in the first place. And I think of like IKEA, huge commercial building, and they've got, at least at one time, they had the largest roof solar array in the state. I don't know if that's still the case. So we know it's possible. We know it's happening already here in the city of St. Louis. I can try and get some, maybe a range on that, but I have not heard from, any of the developers that I've talked to who have said that this would be prohibitively expensive for them to do.
Right, and reason I asked is, of course, it's no secret we got a lot of vacant land, and vacant houses. So we're turning a lot of those things down, and hopefully in the future we'll see spaces where we can have some commercial corridors that will, of course, add value to the ward or the area in general. So I know most contractors who get contracts in the city per se, especially the larger ones, they are more affluent and generally have ability to, afford those upfront costs. The reason I was asking because, the further north you get, of course, the contingent upon it. Each area is different. I want to make sure that in my area in particular that, once we do start to get some traction on building and having some commercial build-ups, that it's economically doable for those individuals who might not have the ability to get, larger contracts. So, of course, the more restrictions and the more costly things are based on, just the more costly things are, the harder it is for individuals who don't, necessarily have as much to deal with those upfront costs to actually get things done. And of course, that's the price of doing business, sometimes contingent upon what business you're in. But, historically, I got to keep it 1,000. Black people just have had a hard time when it comes down to paying a lot of upfront costs, and a lot of minorities in the city does also. So just thinking, I just want to make sure we put it out there, and if there is anything that, could make things a little harder on the back end, we think about ways to ensure there's some exemptions, or we throw something in just to ensure that people are not overwhelmed when that time does come. But I do appreciate the effort. It is 2019, and we got to get the city up to the 20th century standards. We are very, very behind. So thank you. But once again, just if you can just find that information out, if there was a commercial building, let's say that was 2,000 square feet, and a house that was the same, what would be the difference in cost in getting those buildings to be solar ready? Does Frank does anybody have that information?
Alderman, 90% of the time it's actually going to be cheaper on a commercial property because of what the Alderwoman said. You've already got a beefed up roof system. There's already usually quite a bit of equipment that they'll put on the top of that commercial building. So in most cases, I would think it's going to fall more at that 30 cents per square foot. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that information. Well, thank you a lot. Once again, appreciate the effort.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. And I think there's also an opportunity to work with our utilities when it comes to, whether it's a business or a residence that is looking, to partner in some form or fashion to make this financially feasible. We've had rebates in the past, and I think that does open up the door to talk to our utilities about how to make some of these things possible. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Yep. So Alderwoman Tyus would like to add her name as a co-sponsor to this bill.
Thank you.
I would as well. Alderwoman Rice.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Alderwoman, for bringing this. I think that this is a very smart, sort of common sense way to start addressing the issue. And I hope that our utilities are on board understanding that this is the direction that we need to go, that we are a very sunny state, and to take advantage of this clean energy is very important as we go forward. Particularly, the more we do on this front end, the more we are protecting folks who will have less resources in the future to be able to produce their own energy and run their own homes. And I think we as the city of St. Louis are forward thinking in our building codes right now. We've adopted the latest round. They are calling for more energy efficient buildings in general. Thicker walls, things like that are going to insulate people from whatever the climate change is going to bring. And so just thanking you for helping us move even further forward. And I wish that there were some sort of easy fix for all of these beautiful old homes that we have that are still standing. But this is great for people going forward. You know, and as I think continuing to highlight that St. Louis is one of those cities that continually gets mentioned when we look at what the climate change is going to do. It was even Teen Vogue this last week that ran, here's what's going to happen every decade in St. Louis specifically as we go forward. And the more we can do to prepare for that now, I think is important. So my only concern is that I'm very, very heavy on planting trees because, and that was actually one of the things called out in this report, was that lower income areas are less likely to have trees and canopy coverage and the types of things that will keep people safe when we reach temperatures that are unsafe to be outside in. But those types of things also block, could have a potential to block solar energy. So do you know, just sort of offhand, how much those things how much our tree canopy in the city of St. Louis would inhibit solar panels on existing homes right now?
I do not know that off the top of my head. I mean, we are lucky in St. Louis that we have, you know, pretty good tree canopy. I think that we can be doing both at the same time.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're looking at roofs, especially you're looking at pitched roofs and, yeah, I mean, we could probably do some sort of analysis, but you know, when you're building a new home anyway, they've generally cleared a lot of the trees out of the way.
Right.
And depending on the height of that home, you can still have, you know, a nice tree canopy and still have ample, you know, roof space too. I understand your concern. I think we've got to be aware of it, but I think there's a way for us to move forward doing both of those, expanding our tree canopy and making solar available. And you know, to your point about, you know, Missouri's changing climate, we're supposedly going to be looking more and more like Texas. So I know that doesn't necessarily change the orbit of the sun, you know, and all of that, but we are going to be having higher electric burdens for a lot of our citizens, and looking at how we can really help address the utility rates for folks. I know we always say in Missouri we've got, oh, you know, coal is so cheap. Well, not if you look at how many times, you know, you have to bring your kid to the emergency room because of asthma.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of other costs, and I think as we move forward, we've got to be thinking about, you know, who's going to be carrying this energy burden in the future, and I think that this is one of the ways we can definitely address that.
Yep. And if our local utilities are planning for different things in 2050, but planning on using coal until then we should continue to push clean energy for folks. So thank you so much. And I thought I was added as a co-sponsor, but for some reason not on here. So Madam Clerk, if you would please add me as a co-sponsor.
Okay. Are there any other people here to speak in favor or opposition to this bill? I know we have some members in the audience today. Anyone? If you could just introduce yourself for members of the committee and also our listening audience at home.
Good morning, everyone. Maurice Mouillet, Climate Advisor for the City of St. Louis. I just want to piggyback off of Alderwoman Navarro's information that she's given here today for you for the Solar Ready ordinance that she would like to have passed. I would like to add the environmental impact in the City of St. Louis. If 20% of new construction building owners go on to install solar systems, it could account for about 45,000 metric tons of avoided greenhouse gas emissions of CO2 by 2025. So that's equivalent to removing about 10,000 passenger vehicles off the road or conserving enough energy to power about 8,000 homes. So you have the environmental impact, as I just told you. Alderwoman Navarro has told you about the financial impact, the savings that could be for residential and also for commercial. Commercial, it could be upwards of tens of thousands of dollars that they may save. So it could be $10,000, $13,000, $15,000 that they may save. In the commercial project, that's very small in terms of cost per square foot. And as Building Commissioner Oswald has said, commercial, they build their buildings generally to withstand a lot more than a residential building would. So that's really what I would like to add. So, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Scissors? Are you sure? Okay. Please give your mother my regards. For those of you on the committee that aren't familiar, Earl Scissors' mother was my 4th grade elementary teacher, so it's always good to see him.
She's a lot nicer. Small world.
And she apparently is a lot nicer, but that's not how I recall it. But she was actually a really lovely person and still is. She's a wonderful. So any other questions, comments, input from the committee? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill number 146.
I move that we pass Board Bill 146 with a due pass recommendation.
Is there a request for previous roll?
Second.
Is there any objection to previous roll? Hearing none.
I'm sorry, can we do that if
Yes.
folks are not present?
Yes.
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 Okay.
So, and the alder people not present already told me that it was okay to
Great,
proceed. So,
sorry, okay.
thank you for letting me do my job. Previous roll has been called. There's no objection to previous roll. So Board Bill number 146 passes out with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did I request to be a co-sponsor of that? I believe I did. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's probably already done.
Why none of these had co-sponsors on them? Why
Because that was on the
can you use the microphone?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was on the, that's probably not the updated bill that was on there, because when we all added, I remember adding all those names when I read the bill this past Friday, but I am going to double check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because none of them so far have had the co-sponsors.
Okay,
on
yeah,
them, so
I'm almost positive, but I'll definitely double
I
check.
appreciate it. Thank
No
you.
problem.
Okay, so without further ado, we have a few resolutions here, 98, 99, and 100. I know we have a few members of the committee who had to go make a quorum at another committee hearing, so I don't think we'll be taking a vote on these today, but I would and wanted to make sure that we afforded everyone the opportunity to review the recommendations from the Parks Department for funding. These are our annual funding allocations for Prop P, which is the Metro Parks Fund and the Neighborhood Parks Fund. These are projects that are submitted generally through an application process that is sent out to the alder people for recommendations, also based off of assessments from the Parks Department for projects in our wards across the city. So as many of you are aware, the Metro Parks tax is, there's different portions of that go into trust funds that are available for both parks across the city and then also parks that are specifically spelled out in that funding program, such as Tower Grove, O'Fallon, et cetera. So anyway, are there any questions from the committee? I know that the Director of Parks is not here today. I will make sure that she's at our next meeting when we have these resolutions before us. But does anyone have questions or comments or concerns about the resolutions that I should make her aware of before we invite her back? I believe these were originally sent to us earlier this year before we took our summer recess.
I'm glad we're waiting on this because I think there's a lot of information here that I was looking online last night and I couldn't find them, so I didn't know that they were in our email. So if we are, were you saying that you did want to wait on these?
I'm going to wait on these,
Okay.
and we'll schedule another meeting.
Great.
Either next week or potentially the first week in December.
Sounds great.
You know, depending upon vacation schedules and whatnot with everyone. But I know that the alderwoman from the first ward had some questions as well.
Sure.
So I don't want to pass them out today until we have everyone, you know, fully up to date and engaged and present in the conversation. And also, I unfortunately don't think I included the Director of Parks on my invitation for the meeting today, so that's my bad. So I'll make sure that she's aware that we'll be hearing these in our next meeting, so that she'll be present to answer any questions that folks might have of the various projects that are being funded, or just the program funding process in general. Vice Chair Navarro.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering if when we have that presentation, I think it would be nice to be able to kind of visualize the distribution of these funds. I'm wondering if it's possible to even have a map for the Parks Department to provide a map to show, where these parks are that are receiving these funds.
So underneath the ordinance that was passed, 50% of the funds are mandatory to be spent north of Del Mar, and 50% of the funds are mandatory to spend south of Del Mar. So that is how the funds are allocated. Based on my conversation with the director from Parks, she basically splits the large pool of money 50-50 and then allocates it per ward on north side versus per ward on the south side. And as I think as most of us are aware, there are fewer wards on the north side than there are on the south side of Del Mar, because we have a heavier concentration of population in the central corridor and southwest portions of the city, so those wards are generally more compact. So when it's divvied out, there's roughly, I think it's if I recall correctly, like a $20,000-$25,000 difference between wards on the north side and wards on the south side in terms of what's available to be spent in those wards.
I'm just looking at.
In terms of having a visual aid, I will certainly ask the Parks Department if they can do that. But just for the benefit of our listening audience of 3 people at the moment, just want to let them know how that program is funded.
And part of the reason I raise that is, I'm embarrassed to say I don't know, like a lot of these smaller parks, I look at them, I'm like, oh, I don't even know where that one is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as part of our job in terms of accountability, making sure that we can see that these are being spent in the ways that the ordinance lays out would be helpful.
I will make sure that gets updated. If anyone does have any particular questions, though, if you're able to email me with those so I can have, or requests, if you could email those to me so I can forward and compile them and forward them over to our Parks Director, I would appreciate it. But other than that, we've heard all of the board bills before us this morning, and as I mentioned, or as we're all aware, we'll be taking up Board Bill 135 at a later date to be set, along with resolutions number 98, number 99, and number 100. So I will work with the committee to make sure that we find a date that's good for all of us in terms of getting back together for a reconvening of the committee. And with that, the meeting for the Parks and Environmental Matters Committee has been adjourned.